Hey, it's Amy from Create Magic at Work, and welcome to the Magic Formula. I've teamed up with John Nieters from Test RX MD to bring you exactly what you've been asking for. I'm so excited to introduce you to this special series that takes you on a deep dive into experiencing life fulfillment and magical peak experiences through the lens of quantum leadership and spiritual intelligence. In this series, we'll explore powerful practices to help you embrace your full spiritual self as a leader and harness your energy for peak performance. People everywhere are seeking these magical moments that elevate their lives and work, and we're committed to delivering just that. Trust me, this series will not disappoint. So come with me and let's dive into the Magic Formula. Welcome back to the Magic Formula. If you've been tuning in, you know this series is all about operating at your highest and best self. Today, we're covering one of the most crucial pillars of personal and professional evolution: continuous growth. This isn't just about reading books or taking courses. It's about cultivating a mindset where you are constantly evolving, questioning, and stepping into the unknown.
That's exactly it. Growth is not optional. It's a universal law. Everything in nature is either growing or decaying. If you're not actively expanding, you're shrinking mentally, spiritually, and emotionally. And in leadership, this is magnified because your ability to grow directly impacts everyone around you.
I love that. It's like that old saying, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. You've had such an incredible journey, John. What does continuous growth mean to you personally?
For me, growth is curiosity in motion. It's about waking up every day and asking, what can I learn today? Where can I stretch myself? How can I be a little better than yesterday? And I think that's the key there, is only comparing yourself to what you did yesterday, not trying to keep up with the Joneses, as they say. This is what separates the greats from everyone else. It's not just talent, it's their ability to adapt, evolve, and never stop learning.
Yeah, I love that. You made me think of that phrase, comparison is the thief of joy. And if we just stay with where we are on our journey, I think that's really important. So, okay, so let's start with the fundamentals. What does having a growth mindset, like for continuous growth, actually look like in real life?
I like that question. Let's first start with like a preface to that of like there are three types of people in life. You have the growers. They're always evolving, they're challenging themselves, they're pushing themselves, trying to stretch that bubble of what feels comfortable, which enables them to level up in life, which is so crucial. Then you have the floaters. These are the people that everyone knows these people. They're just going through the motions, just maintaining the status quo. They're not really ever stepping outside of their own little bubble because they just want to feel comfortable. And then you also have the sinkers. These are people who potentially have some trauma in the past or have had some things happen where they're just stuck in the past. They aren't really willing to change. So they kind of just push back on that, which drags others down, but it also makes it so that instead of growing their bubble, since they're like clinging on to that so strongly, what happens? Their bubble shrinks, right? So one thing to think about this is, which one are you? More importantly, which one do you want to be? And it's so simple. To be one of these, you just got to switch that mindset. How would this type of person act? What would they do? It's so important. Now, let's get back to kind of the fundamental question at hand that you asked earlier. A growth mindset is the belief that your abilities, intelligence, and potential are not fixed. They're able to always be adaptable and you can change anything at any time. Sometimes it takes a little more effort and intention, but it can easily be done. Here's the catch though with this. Most people don't actually believe this is true. They say they do, but then what happens to their actions? Their actions are not in alignment with what they say. So think about this. How many people say, I'm just not good at numbers, or I could never be a public speaker, or I don't have a creative bone in my body? These are all fixed mindset statements. And every time you say something like this, you're literally putting yourself in a box, which is so crucial for people to understand. It's so easy to shift that mindset. And we'll get into that here in a second.
Okay. So there's the growers, the floaters, and the sinkers. The growers are always evolving and challenging themselves. The floaters are going through the motions, and the sinkers are stuck in the past and resisting change. Where does presence come into that? I know we've done a lot of magic formula talk and conversations about presence. I get the sinkers stuck in the past. I get the floaters just going through the motion. The growers feels kind of futuristic to me, right? But I also could see a shadow with that because if you're constantly focused on a future goal or a future finish line, which I see this a lot in the corporate space with achievement, right? Like always trying to achieve the next goal or in sales or whatever that is. That can be a growth mindset too. How can we help us from falling into shadow with the grower, with the being stuck in the future all the time?
I love that you are making this very relatable to actual use cases for people that you know. It's so important for people to know some of these things. So there have been numerous studies done. Joe Dispenza is huge on this method. Many others are as well. I use this method a lot when I was playing professional level tennis. And what they have found is in your brain, when you think about something, if you truly think about something, and this method is called imagery, right? So you're imagining what you are wanting. So in tennis, like, if I'm serving, I would imagine myself serving an ace or serving a perfect serve to whatever location. Now, in life, you can do the same thing. Your brain, if you are able to truly think of something to that such minute detail that you're thinking about it as if it's truly real, not just some fantasy where you're just like, oh, I want to be a millionaire, right? No, what does that entail? What are you going to do with that million? How are you going to feel? Like what's going to be your purpose in life? Like all of these questions, like hit all your senses when you're thinking this is truly a meditative practice. So hit all the senses and really dissect what that entails. Now, when you do that, what you're doing is you're literally propelling yourself into that reality. And what I mean by that is we've discussed this previously where the key to life is truly priming yourself, whether it's a sales tactic, you're priming the individual you're trying to sell something to, or you're trying to achieve something. It doesn't matter. Everything is about priming. How are you able to prime yourself, your mind, your body, your spirit to literally propel yourself into that reality? And it's because it's like this other thing that maybe people have noticed. Have you ever noticed that, like when you buy a certain brand of car or something sticks out, all of a sudden you start noticing that brand of car or that thing a lot more just every day because it's been brought to your attention, right? So that's priming your body with that brand or that item or whatever it is. So now this is the same thing. If you prime your body and your mind with whatever reality you're wanting, now magically all of a sudden synchronicities start to happen. Now magically all of these things that you had no idea were even possible potentially just start happening to be in alignment with that vision. So another thing to think about here is, everybody sometimes goes through periods of doubt, right? And everybody has to do that. Whether you're a grower, floater, or sinker, doesn't really matter. It's all going to be the same. The difference between the three groups is what they do about that. So the difference here is the sinkers will end up just ruminating on that fact. And guess what happens? You're being emotionally charged and you're ruminating on these negatives. Guess what happens? You're going to attract more of that law of attraction and resonance that we've talked about previously. Now, the floaters, the same thing. They're just going to be going through the motions. They may have a pie in the sky idea, but what are they going to do about it? They're not actually trying to propel themselves forward with any of the skill sets or the things that are needed to actually accomplish that. Now, the growers, this is the really fun part, right? So just like we said earlier with the statements of, I'm just not good at numbers, or I could never be a public speaker, or I don't have a creative bone in my body. It's just one word. It's very simple. Add the word yet to the end of that statement. So instead, you're not putting yourself in the box. You're giving yourself the chance to grow through that, to learn that skill, which is where you push those boundaries to be more in alignment with not only your higher self, but with the reality that you're envisioning, which is so, so, so crucial.
I love that. Just add the word yet. I'm not that great at numbers yet. That's so good.
Now go learn it. Exactly.
Yeah, and that is one shift. Adding the word yet to a statement like that, that shifts you from a sinker to a grower. That's pretty cool. So for somebody that feels really stuck right now and they just feel like they need to get unstuck, what are some ways that they can shift past some barriers that might be showing up? What if they feel like they've tried everything and they still feel like they're stuck?
Yeah. No, I love this. This is a very practical example that a lot of people can relate to. So I was actually listening to a Jocko podcast, and he actually did a really good job of breaking this down for people. So I'm going to do it in a similar fashion, but slightly differently. So basically, what you need in those scenarios is momentum, which is going to help you get into flow state, right? And that flow state is what you always want to achieve. Like when you wake up every morning and you start your day with either meditation or whatever you want, basically the first 90 minutes of every single day is time that you should take for you. That's how you take care of yourself before you open yourself up to business, to friends, to social media, whatever it may be. Now, that 90 minutes is where the growth can happen. That's where you start using that imagery. That's where you start using gratitude and thankfulness and all of these things. Now, the other reason that you do that in the first 90 minutes is because you want to start your day off with a win. And that win leads and feeds into other wins and other wins. And, these small wins start snowballing and snowballing and snowballing, and they get bigger and bigger and bigger. And then you're in flow state and everything just comes naturally. So the most important thing here is to get those small wins that are very achievable. Go hit the gym, go meditate, go make a funny joke with your wife to put a smile on her face and your face, right? These little things are wins. And when you start stacking those wins up, it's almost impossible to not be successful. And what I mean by that is successful in your growth mindset to achieve whatever your goals are. Those wins feed each other and put you into that flow state, which then makes it to where you have all these synchronicities happen. And that's where the true magic happens, where quantum growth feeds into your goals.
And I think that's the difference between the floater and the flow, right? The flow state is flowing with intention, and the floater is just kind of floating around, going through the motions, maintaining the status quo, and not really setting an intention for what type of life you want to live. Something that came up for me as we're talking about continuous growth, because I work in change management and in organizational change, and there's lots of chatter about change and change agents and how we need to respond to change and how we need to continuously grow. I mean, is continuous growth always a good thing? Because cancer continuously grows. So, what's the difference?
So, yes, growth is always a good thing because here's the thing, the duality of life is real. So, if you're not growing, what are you? Declining, right? I don't care if it's cancer, whatever it is. So, maybe the growth is how do you combat that cancer? They're now peptides. So, maybe you need to increase your learning, grow in the ability to learn the compounds to use to treat cancer. You can use things such as like the copper peptide, GHKCU, or you can get into like TB500 or thymosin alpha, all of these different peptides are actually used as new cancer treatments. It's just, you got to go out there and find the information. It's not, just show up on your doorstep and say, hey, this is what you need. Now, here's another part of this. The other aspect of this is growth isn't a one-time event. Like you're not just going to like get to the finish line of achieving growth and just be, oh, okay, I've arrived. Now I'm cool. Now I
I
can
love
just
that.
go sit on the couch and life will just play out perfectly, right? No, that's not how it works. It's truly a lifestyle. And what I mean by that is if you feel like you have arrived at growth, well, maybe that's in that one like facet. There are other facets to life. There are other skill sets to obtain. And this is all from curiosity. That is the magic piece here. So, what are you curious about? What lights you up? What gives you energy? What do you like doing? These are areas that your soul is telling you, go explore, go play in this area. And when you go explore and you go play, magically you get knowledge, magically you get wisdom, magically you get growth because you're just putting yourself in an uncomfortable situation to then adapt and change and add this to potentially your daily habits or potentially your goal setting routine or whatever it may be. That is the key there. Now, there's a couple other things to this. Another way to put yourself in that mindset is think of yourself as you are your future self in the making. Okay. Now think about that. Like really think about that. If you're thinking of yourself as being your future self in the making, now you kind of look at these everyday tasks a little bit differently, right? Because if you think about it like that, now you want to say, okay, how can I make my future self's life 10x better or whatever amount of growth you want? And when you start flipping that perspective, as we've discussed before, perspective is truly everything. When you flip that perspective, now you're going to think, okay, what can I do to propel my future self the absolute most? And whatever that is, I want to align with it because that's what's going to get me to where I want to go. Right now, another thing to think about here is what you tolerate becomes your standard. So if you tolerate mediocrity in yourself, I mean, you're only applying things to yourself here because you're going inwards. It becomes your baseline. And that's clearly okay with you if you accept that, right? Now, if you flip that, if you demand growth from yourself, it also becomes your identity. So it's whatever you put up with is you and your lifestyle. So when you pair that with how can I serve my future self, it becomes very obvious which path to choose.
I like that. What's the best decision for me to make today that my future self will thank me for? And just a small step towards that.
Doesn't have to be big. Exactly.
Yeah. So you kind of talked about some of the biggest blocks to continuous growth. I want to hear from you a little bit more about some of the barriers or some of the fears that people have when they're trying to break through a barrier. Like I recently took the DISC assessment. I think I took it a long time ago, but I recently took it again. And one of the things that came up ranking really high was that I'm always seeking a breakthrough. Like that's part of my DISC makeup apparently. And so for those of us that are seeking a breakthrough to perceived barriers, what are some of those biggest blocks?
I'm glad you asked that. So fear is a big one, which, fear in general is a very, very low vibrational state, which is why you see media trying to sell fear and all this other stuff going on in the world. That's a whole nother podcast though. But the three big ones here, they're all related to fear. Fear of failure. People avoid the growth because they don't want to look bad or make mistakes or anything like that. But switch that perspective. Again, it's all about perspective, right? So what if instead you switch that perspective to failure is just feedback on whatever you're trying to do? It's the market. I mean, depending on what you're doing in business, it's the market showing you, okay, maybe this isn't the right way, but maybe you're onto something and maybe you just need to pivot it or tweak it slightly. And now it's a huge success. You never know, right? So it's all about how are you able to roll with the punches, kind of like the Rocky. There's a famous Rocky quote where, it's not like how hard you hit, but it's how many times you can still get hit and get back up, right? It's the same deal there. Getting hit teaches you, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't have done that, right? Maybe I should have done a little bit different. Now, the next part of this is fear of change.
Well, and also before you move to fear of change, you have me thinking if we're not failing, we are not taking action.
Or risk.
And by definition, we are either the floater with I love your new three things or the sinker. Because if we aren't failing, we're not moving towards our goals. I mean, you have to have different iterations of what you're doing. I'm sure some of that comes with success. So even our perspectives on the word failure, I think, can be a huge shift towards continuous growth because at least that's telling you I made a step towards this vision. And what I'm perceiving as failure right now may not actually be failure. but it may be a message that, like you said, I need to pivot, or now I need to iterate something differently towards this vision. But you absolutely are learning something and you're taking something with you. So that you just had me thinking about that a little bit more, because really the quantum leader understands that mistakes and chaos lead to innovation. And so if we operate with that understanding that mistakes and chaos will lead to innovation and ultimately success, I think we can be a lot easier on ourselves when we have perceived failures or mistakes. Like, I mean, look how many times Elon Musk launched a rocket into the air that exploded. Talk about some innovation he's done in his life. Those are some mistakes that have led to some
Yeah.
innovation.
Or one of the most popular and most famous example of that is Edison making the light bulb. Do you know how many iterations he had to go through to make that? Here's the cool part here. We're talking about iteration, right? So now think about what speeds iteration up. This is where AI comes into play, because the whole thing about AI is how to speed up that iteration cycle. So spit out one draft or iteration. Did that work? Cool. If it did, awesome. Run with it. If not, boom, create another one. And I know, until you get the right feel there. And that's truly where AI is, super powerful. Now getting into fear of change. Growth requires change. Think about it. How are you going to be able to grow if you're the same? Definitionally, that doesn't work out, right? So by definition, you're going to have to change to grow. And change can be uncomfortable, whatever that is. I mean, whether it's an addict beating a habit or whether it's a person stepping up the corporate ladder, two very different things, but they're both going to make you feel uncomfortable in different ways. So that's a crucial thing there. The one thing that will always remain true is things are always going to change. Change is going to be constant. That's going to be another natural law, right? So if change is always constant, if you're growing, then you just got to get with it. Got to be adaptable. We got to be flexible. The people that aren't able to do that are the people who normally that links back to ego. And so that's why sometimes psychedelics can be such a good tool for people to have that ego death experience and understand, it's not all about them and their way. There can be a much better way. Now, the third one here, fear of judgment. This is a big one for people. It's a big reason why public speaking is, one of the most feared things to do nowadays, or really has been. So what people think, what if I don't succeed? The truth is no one is watching you as closely as you think. You truly are your own worst critic, and it's all in your own mind. So like, if you understand that, like, everything is all about you and how you can improve yourself. Now, here's another little piece. Back to the small wins thing earlier. This doesn't just go for when you're really stuck. These small wins need to compound every single day. And think about it like this. I do a lot of trading in the market. So I think about a lot of compounding interest and stuff like that. So there's the rule of 1%. So if you improve by just 1% every day, 1%, is that really that difficult? I don't think it is, right? 1% every day. In 1 year, you'll be 37 times, it's a multiple, not a percent, better than you were today, or than you are today, because of the compounding effect of interest with money, but also energy and growth. So it's very important to have that growth. So how you combat some of the fears that we just talked about too is reframing them. We just talked about perspective earlier. Instead of fearing failure, honestly, you need to almost embrace it as a necessary part of the process. If you're not failing, you're not doing anything. Definitely nothing worthwhile. So instead of fearing change, recognize that stagnation is actually more dangerous. We talked about that already, to where entropy is real. You don't use it, you lose it. That's a very real saying for a reason. And then instead of worrying about judgment, remember the people who criticize you are never doing more than you. You're always doing more than them, which is really a reflection on them. So this comes into kind of another point here. The mirror of growth is what I like to call this. So what you judge in others reflects your own growth stagnation. So what I mean by that, if someone else's success triggers you, it's a sign of where you need to grow. And instead of judging them, ask, what can I learn from their successes? And that will truly propel you forward. Hey everyone, we hope you're enjoying this episode of The Magic Formula. Amy and I want to take a quick break to share something special with you.
Yes, I'm so excited. We have created a dedicated page at createmagicatwork.net called The Magic Formula, where we've curated a collection of tools and products that align with everything we're talking about here on The Magic Formula: health, success, resonance, and leadership.
And most importantly for you guys, these products we personally recommend and vet, putting our name on these products to help you raise your vibration, shift your mindset, and bring more magic into your life and leadership.
We've added the link to the show notes so you can just click on it straight away and explore some of the most cutting-edge products you can get to elevate your life and leadership.
We're excited to keep this journey going with you guys. Now let's get back to the Magic Formula.
I've always been so thrown off about people that are jealous of someone else's success because we don't know anyone else's story or how they got there. And there's plenty for us all. And when we celebrate the success of others, that means that's possible for us. And these are just some of my thoughts from everything you shared. The blocks that people can have to continuous growth, the fear of failure we touched on, right? Like the experts in the practice. That's what I always share with my clients, the experts in the practice. You talked about public speaking on fear of judgment. You're not going to show up and step on a stage without practice first. You got to practice speaking. Right. And you might be like, oh, wow. I mean, if I went back to my first podcast interview like 3.5 years ago where I was a guest, I probably would want to like crawl under a table right now and hide and like never leave my house again. But the expert comes in the practice, right? And when we are constantly worried about what other people think, you know what that is to me? That is high self-orientation. That focus is on me. I'm worried about what people are going to think. I'm worried about what they're thinking in their head. I'm worried about not succeeding. And there's two things to that came to me as you were sharing. The first is nobody's thinking that deeply about you because they're in their own head about themselves half the time.
So true.
So you don't have to worry about that. And then the other piece is part of building trust as a leader and being a trusted advisor is having low self-orientation and practicing that. And if your internal focus is all about you, what you look like, how you're showing up, what you're thinking other people are thinking, you are not going to build trust and have leadership presence with others because you're not thinking about the people you're speaking to and how it's going to impact them. And so those are just some ways to view this fear of judgment. Let's get out of our own way. Are we looking for impact or are we looking for adoration? And then that brings in that whole ego piece that you talked about with impact over adoration. We're looking for impact if we're quantum leaders here, right? With the magic formula. Anyways, I just had to share what was coming up for me as you were sharing those 3 blocks: the fear of failure, the fear of change, and the fear of judgment. And it's things that we all go through, you and I, right? And everyone listening. And I think it's just good that we all remind each other that it's important to reframe these moments when they arise to help us move past the barriers.
I love that. Now, another thing too that I would link into that as well, just real quick before we move over. So all of these fears that we just kind of outlined, right? A lot of people can still have triggers like in the past for certain things, and they're reminded of how a certain event happened. And then that kind of cripples them per se, I guess, to try to move forward now. Cause they're like, oh my God, what happens if that happens again?
Yeah, it's like stored in their nervous system. Yeah.
Exactly. So you have to create a new neural pathway to get past that, right? Because you've done this a certain way, and the more that you've limited yourself based upon that event, the stronger that current neural pathway is. So to create the new neural pathway, there's many ways to do it. I mean, psychedelics is one easy way. That's not for everybody though. So another way to think about this is, and Joe Dispenza is a huge person on this fact as well. Just always remember, you are not your past. You are not defined by it whatsoever. You are what you choose to do in the present, which leads to future things. but you're always about the present. So in the future, you're still in the present, but at a future date. So what I mean by this is who you were yesterday is completely irrelevant, but who you are becoming is everything. And it's a great way for people to like reframe something, because you can truly choose that starting with this breath that I take right now, I'm going to live my life as XYZ. So if you want to be a millionaire, start thinking as a millionaire. If you want to be a billionaire, start thinking as a billionaire. Those are two different mindsets. Normally, the millionaire is a little more centered on themselves, not always, obviously, but this is the traditional stereotypical mindset. Whereas the billionaire wants to bring everyone up with him and collaborate with everyone. And so that opens up so many different revenue streams, which obviously in the long run is going to be much more financially fruitful. So a big thing there is to just remember whatever you want in life, imagine what the embodiment of that person would be that achieves that. Every facet of their personality you need to think about, and then start living your life just like that.
Yeah. Something that you shared, the people who criticize you are never doing more than you. I think that's an interesting thing to think about. And I think that it's helpful for leaders in the workplace. There's a lot of chatter about feedback models and how do we give feedback properly in the workplace, and how does feedback get delivered for growth and to empower each other, rather than someone that receives feedback and feels like their entire being is being attacked or their identity is being attacked. Because I have felt that way many times in the I mean, it's rough and tumble out there in sales and in the corporate space. Have you heard this quote, "The man in the arena"? It's a Teddy Roosevelt quote. It became quite popular when Brene Brown launched her work on Daring Greatly. And the quote is, "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat." It's one of the most inspirational quotes I've read on, like if you're gonna like get in the ring. And I had to share it because you mentioned Rocky earlier. Like the themes are coming all the way around. Okay, so let's tie this all in. What are some tools that people can use today that will help them feel like they're moving towards that 1% that will make them 37 times greater by the end of the year?
I love that. First of all, let me touch on something that you just said about how like people have their entire being attacked or feel like that way when there's criticism, right? Understand that depending on who's criticizing, or let's say this differently, instead of criticizing, let's say they're giving you constructive advice, right? First of all, look at where this person's coming from. Have they done what you're trying to do? Have they been in those shoes? If they haven't been in those shoes, then you probably shouldn't really heed too much of their advice unless it truly is ringing true for you, right? Second of all, people that have walked in that path or worn those shoes, they're probably giving you that to help you in some way, not to tear you down. So they're trying to help bring you up. So then understand that that is truly feedback that's going to potentially help propel you forward. And if it's a person that hasn't walked in those shoes, it shouldn't matter at all. There's no reason to listen to those people because they don't know what you're going through. They don't know what the situation is. So I want to make that very clear first. Now, let's hop back to kind of those tools for people, the tactical tools for growth. So that 1% growth, daily. So a big part of this is, remember that 90 minutes that we covered earlier? This is where you want to incorporate some of these items into that time. This is why people wake up at 4 a.m., 5 a.m. to do things for themselves, to get to the gym and all that.
I will never. I'm just kidding. I said I will never. I'm so not a morning person. I can never get up at 5 a.m., but I like where you're going.
Yeah. So the big thing here is daily micro learning. So pick up a book, watch a podcast, or watch something that expands your perspective every day. Because again, life is always about perspective. So how are you able to expand your consciousness, expand your perspective to be able to deal with any situation or scenario and to propel you forward towards your goals the most? So whether that's a book on sales or whatever.
You're just, the daily micro learning feels so powerful to me because I am thinking of how much we scroll on social media. And if we could replace even half that time, I was thinking about it last night. I was kind of beating myself up about it, which I know I shouldn't be. And you got to reframe that talk and move to continuous growth. But I was like, I got to stop. The amount of comedic reels that I send to my friends is amazing. But I could have read 30 books by now, probably with the time. And I love to read. I'm an avid reader. And last night was like this daily micro learning. I'm so glad you're calling it out as a tool. I would challenge everyone listening to even cut your social media scrolling by a quarter, by 25%, and replace it with reading a book that you've wanted to read, or listening to an audiobook or a podcast that helps you feel like you're moving towards some sort of continuous growth for the vision of who you want to be in this movie of your life. I just felt really passionate about jumping in and sharing that while you were talking about the daily micro learning, because it hit me last night.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So now another thing to think about here to help you with this, not just you, but the listeners. If you think about it, like, okay, so a lot of people are good at business. Like these listeners that we're going to have here are either high achievers, entrepreneurs, whatever, right? So normally they know all these things about business or their business, right? How do they know that? From data, right? How do you know like that you need like some sort of medical treatment or therapy? Data, lab work. How do you know like for anything, you have to have data to then act upon it. So if you feel like you're so rushed every day, feel like you're doing all sorts of stuff during the day, track it. Get the data to figure out how you spend your time every single day. And you're going to probably be pretty surprised. There's going to be a lot of hidden nuggets in there for various things. Hell, do you go scroll Facebook while you go to the bathroom and stay in the bathroom for 25 minutes each time you go? I mean, just simple little stuff that you wouldn't even think about, right? Just things like this. And then you can get into time tracking in terms of app usage, right? And then you can see what apps you're using throughout the day. And then you can get into utilizing some of the focus modes if you have an iOS device, and you can, kind of lock down the apps that you see. Just various tactics there to try to really make sure that you're honing in on that piece and getting the data so that it can be an actionable item. The next piece of this for more tools for enhancing growth. So we've got the daily micro learning. Next is going to be to seek that discomfort. You guys have heard this a lot this episode. Push yourself, whether it's physically, mentally, or spiritually, push yourself. And I always say that you need a win in those three areas every single day. You need a mental win, you need a physical win, and you need a spiritual win. That can be as simple as meditating, going to the gym, and doing some sort of other mental exercise like imagery, however you want to do that. So those are three facets that you need to have that win every single day for growth, and then push yourself. Like when you go to the gym, do you lift the same amount of weights every single time you go in? Probably not, because your body's going to acclimate to those weights and they're going to get easier and easier to lift. But if you aren't raising the weight or changing the exercise to hit a different part of the muscle or challenge yourself in some way, you're not seeking discomfort, you're not going to grow. So that's just a physical one, but there are many other ways to apply that. So always seek discomfort because you're pushing yourself to do better. So you can commit to doing one thing daily. That's so simple. Just one thing daily that stretches you in some way. It's that simple. The next thing here, audit your circle. So again, we were talking about data before. So you have to remember that we've talked about resonance and frequency, and who you surround yourself with is what your resonance and frequency is going to set to. So if you surround yourself with people who are high achievers, entrepreneurs and growth minded, you're very likely going to be along that same path. It's going to be much easier because you're on the same path, which means you can bounce things off of them. You can ask them for advice. You can do various things that are going to further facilitate your own growth. If you're, around people who, as we mentioned earlier, are the sinkers and they're stuck in the past and they aren't wanting to change, well, what do you think is going to happen to you? You think that you're going to be able to grow effectively? Sure, you can still do it, but it's going to be a lot harder and your growth is going to be much slower because they're going to anchor you. And so why pull around an anchor the whole time when you don't need to? When instead you can have the wind at your back helping you propel forward. Very, very crucial. So think about the top 5 people in your life. Kind of figure out what their characteristics are and then look at yourself and see how much those are in alignment. It's pretty incredible when you really do that. Now, the next piece to this is to practice some sort of reflection, whether that's journaling, whether it's, you could take some sort of device, like for example, like I just happen to have this on my desk, this Claude device, which I know in our Quaid meeting, we kind of talked about, but this is a device that basically acts as an external microphone. You can even use the devices on your iPhone too, to record yourself, but if you don't like writing, you can just talk into it. Right. And the cool part is now with AI, you can get those in a document format and feed those in as a knowledge base and help AI kind of craft, your daily routine or certain activities to help you grow towards whatever your goals are. Pretty cool, pretty important. I would make sure that you're always doing some sort of reflection, because if you aren't reflecting, how are you going to know what you learned? Or how are you going to know like how well you're doing? You're not asking questions. And in life, the person who asks the questions is the director of any conversation, whether it's a conversation with yourself or whether it's a conversation with somebody else. Think about it. When you get interrogated by law enforcement for something, who's asking the questions? They're directing the conversation, right? It's that simple. And then the last piece here, this kind of goes along with the idea that we've talked about previously of kind of like gamifying life. You're going to want to turn challenges that may present themselves, or not may, that will present themselves, into experiments. So you're gamifying things. So that experiment, okay, so if I do A, I get B result, right? If I do C, I get D result. Now, if I'm trying to get E, what do I need to do that cause and effect? There's that relationship of cause and effect. That's a Hermetic principle. So figure out the effect you're wanting, work backwards and figure out the cause that causes that. And then you can experiment with different causes to get the elicited effect. So it's pretty cool. So instead of fearing failure, view every challenge as an experiment where the only result is learning. The big key here is don't be obsessed with outcome. Be obsessed about growth and how you're able to learn new skills, which will normally kind of like trickle into a bigger and bigger stream, into a waterfall that allows you to truly blossom. It's pretty incredible.
So good. This has been amazing, John. Thank you for sharing all of this today on continuous growth. My takeaways, my wish for everyone listening is that we check in and see if we are using escapism. That word came to me, escapism from who we want to be. The scrolling came up for me on social media. Is that that's escapism, right? Because things might feel chaotic. And you are not your past. That's another thing I wrote down. The 1% win every day that helps you grow 1% every day, the mental, physical, and spiritual win. And I think my biggest shift, and it's always a continual shift with this because we're so programmed, right? Is viewing this life, is gamifying it. I don't mean that to dumb down in a way, I guess, but looking at the challenges that I experience in my life as experiments and as things that I can experiment with just somehow takes the sting out of things that can feel really hard at times. And if I can look at it in that way, like, oh, I'm going to experiment with this solution and I'm going to experiment with this solution and just see what happens, because this is my game of life, and how do I want to be on this journey? That's been really, really helpful for me. And when in doubt, there's always you to reach out to for amazing consultation on psychedelics You're a great resource for that with intention and with spirituality and really for the greater good. So, any other final thoughts? This was incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I love how you said the gamifying thing and made it very clear that it's not like just trying to dumb something down. When you gamify something, it's much more than that. And I like exactly what you said. I'm going to basically just reword the same answer per se. Is when you're gamifying it, you're pulling that emotional charge out of things that can like bog you down. And instead, you're able to play, right? And when you play, when children play, are they happy or sad? They're happy. So if you're happy, is that a higher vibrational state or a lower vibrational state? It's a higher vibrational state. So if it's a higher vibrational state and you're able to play, now you can attract all this abundance. You can attract all of these things that are in alignment with your vision because you just gamified your life. It's that simple. It's so cool.
Love it. Well, I have a big vision for Create Magic at Work, and I'm going to play a little bit more with the banks.
There you go.
And I'm going to play a little bit more and see what happens with, impact. Anyways, you've just really inspired me today. Thank you for sharing with all of the community.
Definitely. And I know that we've talked about too, this as well off air, but I'm going to open up or create a container to where listeners are able to reach out for coaching sessions, for life perspective, for any of these things, to give you guys a space to actually be able to get in contact with me, as it can be hard through other businesses and all that kind of stuff. So I definitely want to open this up for people and give you guys the ability to get some insights that maybe, are hard to see within your own life. Sometimes you just kind of need that person on the outside to kind of help tug you along.
Yeah, I think that's great, because even 1 or 2 sessions with you or more, can really crack open, help people listening break through maybe a barrier that they have. I know in just a couple of sessions I've had with you, we've been able to elevate my resonance and my frequency with certain things in my environment or certain things that I need. You're a wealth of information on that for the greater good and for the best intention for all of humanity. So I highly recommend everyone check out the show notes for the magic formula and schedule with John and see how he can help you shift quite rapidly. Please, if you
Thank you
found
for the kind words.
yeah, thank you to the Create Magic at Work community for diving into the magic formula with us. This has been an amazing journey, and we still have quite a few episodes to go into this series. So we hope that you're finding value in what we're sharing in this deep dive with John Nieters and his amazing life and journey and what he's able to share with us. So share the episode if you found it useful with your friends. Leave a review. We'll see you next time on the Magic Formula.
Thank you for tuning in. Bye now.
I want to thank each and every one of you for coming back every week to listen to a new episode of Create Magic at Work and really helping to support and advocate for healthy leaders, workplaces, and lives for all of us. If you want any information on how to connect with me, click on the link in the show notes. You'll get access to all of the social media links for Create Magic at Work. Stay following along for more amazing episodes where we help you improve productivity and profitability in the workplace and decrease stress. Sending magic to everyone, and see you next time.